Some people have described this as a border surge. I mean, the fact is that we are investing resources in securing our border that have never been invested before.
Well,
People going over the border isn't a problem?
I would actually argue, yeah. Look, the Wall Street Journal had an editorial on this, calling it the border security ruse, that our border is as safe as it's been in decades, that we have illegal entries are at a all-time low practically. This is not going to solve any problem. This is just them trying to win votes.
Charles, you've been consistent all along in saying that you need tougher enforcement as part of immigration reform. One, what about Kirsten saying that there really isn't a problem, people coming over the border? And two, is this going to solve that problem?
Well, if the problem doesn't exist, why do we have 11 million illegals in the country? And why did the CBO, in reporting on the economic effects of the bill before the Corker Amendment, say that it will reduce illegal immigration only by a quarter, and estimate that in 10 years after the passage of the bill, we'll have 5 million new illegal immigrants? That's why you have to have enforcement. But the key issue is, what are you measuring here? Inputs or outputs? What the bill does, a bit of shock and awe, it picks a number out of a hat, huge number of new agents, again, without any explanation of why 20, why not 100,000? It's all about input, spending, and we heard Corker say, we're going to spend a ton of money on this. Well, we doubled this per capita spending on education in the last 30 years, and test scores have gone down. Inputs are irrelevant. What matters is output. And that's the key issue here. The Core 9 Amendment says the path to citizenship begins when we know that we have 100% awareness of the border and 90% interdiction. It doesn't start otherwise. And what this does,
in other words, it's not a matter of what resources you put in, it's the results that you get.
You've got to measure that you've actually stopped the river and you turned it into a trickle. And what the argument of the others is, in the Corker Amendment, is, no, that's going to be a goal. A goal is meaningless. It's got to be a guarantee. And I think it ought to hinge entirely on that. If it's a goal, I would oppose the bill. If it's going to be a requirement that you don't start the path until you have 100% awareness and 90% interdiction, as the Gang of Eight had promised us a month or two ago, I would say, if it doesn't have that, oppose it.
You know, I just think it sets up an impossible barrier to entry for immigrants.
But Charles makes an important point.
But why would it be impossible? You appoint an objective commission of people who aren't in politics, who are experts on this, and say, you tell us if we have 90% interdiction or not.
Are there going to be people on that board who have the same views as Senator Jeff Sessions?
It won't matter.
There's nothing that you could ever do to get him to agree that these people should be able to come into the country?
Sessions is not the one who will decide on whether the trigger has been met. You appoint outside people, as you do. You know, the guys who count the votes of the Academy Award will do.
Yeah.
People
I also don't really want to live in a country that has a fence around it.
The parties there have been fighting for a very long time, even before 9/11. And we don't expect that it will be easy, but we do think ultimately we're going to need to see Afghans talking to Afghans about how they can move forward and end the cycle of violence there so that they can start actually building their country.
What do you make of this entire enterprise, and why do you think the Obama administration is pushing it?
Cover. In the Vietnam War, it was called a decent interval. It's a way to show that we're negotiating our way out, where in fact Obama has said, one way or the other, we're going to leave. This will not accomplish anything. The Taliban understand exactly what's going to happen. If the Allies, the West, is going to leave, the war will resume, and they assume they will ultimately defeat the government already in Kabul. So they have no incentive to concede anything. And I think Karzai was absolutely right to blow up over what happened yesterday, because it was sheer a propaganda move. It was a way in which the rebels, the Taliban, were claiming the legitimacy of a government, of the previous one, the pre-9/11 government. And Obama, in a clip that you showed earlier on the show, dismissed it as a couple of words on a wall. I mean, doesn't he understand that this is all about who's a legitimate government? And to dismiss it as a couple of words is to misunderstand exactly why the rebels are coming to the table. It's to achieve legitimacy, to get equal status in the world with the Karzai government. You got one choice in Kabul, you got one choice in the Taliban, and that is exactly what the Vietnamese did in negotiating at the end of that war. That was why we had all the arguments over the shape of the table of negotiations. Who had the status of a legitimate government? Obama would have given it away with a flick of the hand, but now he's had to reverse himself, but only because Karzai, who's not that stable to start with, flipped out yesterday.
I understand what you're saying about what's in it for the Taliban. What cover does it provide for the U.S., for President Obama?
Because instead of speaking about how the war is going to wind down and to see how ultimately the war will have ended up accomplishing nothing, and remember this, many more Americans have died under Obama in Afghanistan than under Bush. Obama's the one who tripled the number of troops. Obama's the one who declared a surge. Obama's the one who wanted to somehow pretend, or let's not say pretend. Democrats had run before saying Bush took his eye off the ball. He didn't invest enough in Afghanistan. Obama wanted a vindication of the Democratic view. Instead, it left a lot of Americans dead, and he never intended on winning the war. He said on the sentence after announcement of a surge that he'd be leaving. So I think it's a way to kind of retroactively vindicate a surge which obviously has failed.
This has been a Sunfish production.